Welcome, Professor Dame, and congratulations on your nomination as a PhD Honoris Causa at Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. How do you feel about receiving this recognition from an online university?
Oh, it's a great honour. It's always an honour to be awarded an honorary degree. It's a bit of a lifetime achievement award sometimes. So there is a sense of making you feel old. But I was here many years ago. I was part of the advisory board for IN3. I think it's very exciting. It reflects on the work I do, of course.
Yes, you allowed an online university to exist with your work.
Well, yes, the way it exists today. I mean, the Open University in the UK was all done by sending paper in the post initially.
Yeah.
There was no internet. So,
yes. So the web has had a profound influence on commerce, society, education, and under every aspect. What do you think are the more significant societal changing that has been driven by the web, the existence of the web?
Well, almost everything. It's really hard to... when the web was first proposed by Tim Berners-Lee, I was already working on hypermedia systems, and the idea was that we would have global information systems. But what Tim did with the open protocols for the World Wide Web was make it completely universal. And we talked about the democratization of knowledge, the idea that everyone, anywhere in the world, as long as they could get access to the internet, would be able to access knowledge. So, and that was a very naive idea. In a sense, that was the vision, but it's what I don't think we really thought about was the impact that the commercial world would have in terms of we wanted to encourage companies and universities and governments to use the web to exchange information. And when we first started talking to companies, I can remember going to boardrooms and saying, you really need to be on the web, and they would say, why does our company need to be on the World Wide Web? Right? We advertise on television. We don't need. Now you can't exist without having a presence on the web, and of course it's led to the growth of the tech companies that we needed to help us find our way around the web. We needed a Google to help us search. We needed a place to put our photos and our videos, it turns out. And all these things and then the social media companies emerged as the web became more interactive. And I think in retrospect, it's easy to see why this has happened, but we didn't foresee the huge growth of the companies, the way they'd become effective monopolies and would take control of our data. We didn't really begin to see that. It became quite clear in the middle of about 2004-05 that this was the way things were going. And there's now a rearguard action that says we have to re-decentralize the World Wide Web, empower us to manage our own data more rather than the companies using our data to make money. And I mean, they give us services that we want. So we give them our data, they give us back services, but they also use our data to make money. So.
And what do you think about in regard, especially to education?
It's really, as the Chinese would say, it's yin and yang. There's fantastic. It has given rise to amazing opportunities in education, and people all around the world. I mean, it's an open university. This university knows very well how it can reach people that a regular traditional education system is not going to reach, and so that it's been very empowering in that sense. Some people can only get a good degree because, when they're mature students, they can come to an open university like this, or you have people in the developing world that can have their eyes open to what's possible. But the downside is the way that the companies and now governments as well can use it to send the messages they want to send, and the companies have really complete control of our data. I mean, if you want to use anything now, an app on your phone or download something on from a website, you just have to, it says, have you read our terms and conditions? And we all just go, yes. And we haven't. Of course we haven't. It's far too long. Nobody, and we're not lawyers. So we just say yes to whatever terms and conditions they impose. And basically they're saying, if you give us your data, we can do anything we like with it. As long as, and this is where the European Union has made a good progress, is as long as they don't compromise our privacy. There are, with GDPR and similar types of laws emerging around the world, there is some protection about privacy. In China, of course, it's very different because there are privacy protections, but the Chinese government can look at anything. That's a different. We wouldn't want to be in that sort of government control.
But it was previous to the web existence.
Well, it was exactly, and it's a very cultural thing. In our culture, we would defend freedom of speech to the hilt. Is part of the problem on the web, because people feel they can do anything and say anything, because their argument is, well, I can say what I like. It's freedom of speech, and it's really difficult to create legislation around that.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for the content on the web?
Yeah. The balance. We need to find a balance.
It's really
to
difficult.
Maintain freedom of speech.
It's really difficult, and the bad actors, the people who want to do you harm, steal from you, be nasty to you, they are very fast at doing these things. They're faster than the legislators. Yes. So it's a really, and actually I think there's a moral responsibility too. I think this should be part of education. It's, we have moral responsibilities you don't go up and hit someone in the street. If you do, you get taken to, arrested and taken, it's a criminal offence. We need more criminal offences. But it's slow to get that through legislation because it's got to be fair. Yeah.
So about expression, but from another point of view, the web has also fostered the new form of art, digital art and sound and music. How do you envision the future in the web of this field?
Well, I'm going to have to say the dreaded words ChatGPT.
Ooh.
Because you have to bring... So what's happening now, of course, the web... Tim put the first website up in 1990. So that's 32 years ago. Is that right? 33, yeah, this year. Now, since that time, we've had the growth of modern artificial intelligence, and just recently, machine learning has come to prominence, and the generative AI that is behind the new GPT technology from OpenAI, and the ChatGPT that was taking the world by storm. And of course, ChatGPT, GPT can create natural language, can create art, but I use the word create. Actually, it doesn't create; it copies, and then it presents it as information in a form that reads like English or Catalonian, in a form that looks like the art of in the style of a Rembrandt or whatever, and this is going to profoundly change what happens on the web. And it's not, I think we should embrace it, but in a way that we're responsible about doing that. And that we should get our students to use it, but declare they're using it. I remember when calculators were introduced. I'm old enough to remember calculators coming into the curriculum. When I was a maths student, I had to do my numerical analysis exam to 5 decimal places by hand, right? And then the calculators came along, and suddenly you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do long division by hand. And everyone went, we can't let the children use calculators. Well, of course we can. We changed the exam questions. We changed the way we assess them. But actually, it's better for them. And we have to think of this new form of artificial intelligence as something that we can embrace and use, because it doesn't create, human beings create still. We still have the advantage in that sense. When the artificial intelligence can create, then we have issues around the superpower. But I think that that's going to change the way we use the web really quite profoundly.
So it's your position about that is we have to work in collaboration with these tools in order to amplify our intelligence.
Exactly.
Not to lose it.
Help us do things better. You know, if you think about asking a student to write an essay, when I was a student, you had to go to a library and get books out, right? And there was a disadvantage if you couldn't get those books, right? If you couldn't get to a library. And then we moved to a phase where the web comes along and you have Wikipedia and Google, which changed the way we do research. But again, there's an equality thing, because the students that don't have access are disadvantaged. And now we're moving to a stage where you've got other tools driven by artificial intelligence technologies that will help us do things better, that can start to create an essay for you. And then I think we'll get the students to build on those. We'll ask them to use ChatGPT and then say, now build on that. Think about what this means, rather than just sort of the cut and pasting out of something from Wikipedia. It's
about maybe making the right questions to the
It is, and
tools.
That's the role for educators, is to think about what tools are available and how you use that to create a better education system.
What is your position about this proposal?
Tim's proposal is solid, right? Social linked data. That's not the same as what's become the meaning of the phrase Web3. We did used to talk about when the semantic web. In fact, that term was then taken and in a way misused by the blockchain community, who said, right, we will use blockchain to create a better web, a re-decentralized web that takes away the power from the companies, so much power from the companies, and empowers people more. But that got a bit corrupted by the cryptocurrency people and the games industry. They really latched onto this. And it became more about getting people to use cryptocurrency than re-decentralizing the web. Meanwhile, Tim is still pursuing his solid proposal. SOLID stands for social linked data, so it's back to linked data. But what he means is linked data structures that work for people. That's the social piece. The problem is that, as I see it, I would back Tim and say he's got the right technical approach. But when he proposed the first web, the resistance was an inertia that people didn't know, governments didn't know, companies didn't know why they needed a web, why they needed to have a website. Once it got over that resistance and enough people using the website, the web became the dominant way of sharing information. But this time round, with Solid, which I could talk about the next generation of the World Wide Web, whether we call it Web 3.0 or whatever, the resistance is the big companies. They will have no interest at all in a re-decentralized web. They like a web that's centralized in their company at the moment. And at the moment, we engage with lots of different companies, right? The Googles, the Metas, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We have our profiles in each of those companies. Nothing's linked up. You're in those silos. And they want to increase their share of the market. And so that ecosystem is going to be very resistant to what Tim's trying to do. It could be through governments that Solid wins through. I think the governments see the idea that being able to if Tim talks about pods in Solid, and you have your own pod in which you have the data that's about you, and governments can see the idea that yes, if we could give everybody a pod and make that the way that our citizens interact with us, we have permission to use the data in their pod according to the terms and conditions that we set, then they can see the benefits of that. But breaking through with the resistance of the big companies is going to be incredibly difficult. It's very different, a whole different scenario to what it was in the 1990s.
But making a lot of resistance
a huge
necessary.
amount, because it's their business model, that you're challenging their entire business model. And we've already seen that with what happened with ChatGPT and OpenAI challenging Google's business model. Yeah. By saying this is a different way to search, use a natural language AI system that you instead of getting links back, you get essays. People, and Microsoft investing in OpenAI to connect. To integrate their search engine Bing with GPT.
As we are talking about in artificial intelligence, there is a lot of concern about ethics and the lack of inclusion and diversity in the design and implementation of an artificial intelligence. What do you think are the critical points?
Thank you for asking me that, because there is a lot of talk about AI and ethics, and I like to add morals into that as well, our values. But the thing about ethics is that you're constantly, I use the phrase tilting at windmills, which is quite a Spanish phrase to use. Because you don't know what the future's going to bring. So when you're talking about ethics today, none of us know what sort of artificial intelligence will be available to us in 20, 30 years' time, which will create ethical issues we haven't thought about today. So we can't say this is how it will be forever. We had the Asimov rules that were quite a good start in the science fiction world of, robots will not do this, they won't kill people. And we need to try and build those sort of principles in. And governments will regulate. I think of regulation as the practical implementation of ethics. They'll get advice on the sorts of things they need to regulate, and then we'll build out from that. And we can talk more about that if you want to. But the key thing for me with the ethical debate is what you mentioned, which is the diversity and inclusion. Because artificial intelligence is largely, at the moment, developed, designed, the systems that are designed using by a small subset of society, usually male, of geeky tendencies, and sort of like clustered around the AI universities or the big companies. And there is, to me, it's really, really important, because AI is going to profoundly affect the whole of society, that the whole of society is reflected in that design and development. So we need more diversity in terms of people who are actually doing the programming, writing the code, building the systems, in the people who manage those people, in the designers who design the products and the systems that we're all going to use, as well as the regulators and the people who are going to audit AI companies and the people who are going to worry about content, which are lawyers, philosophers, all the things we were talking about earlier, very different mix of people, not just people who are, computer scientists or mathematicians who are going to do the data science and the AI development. So my mantra is, if it's not diverse, then it's not ethical. Because my argument is that if a company doesn't have a diverse workforce, there's more chance that what they're doing could lead to unethical values being exported in their products and systems.
Yes, so not just unethical, but colonialist or
yes.
whatever.
So I try and get diversity put into the ethical considerations. It's not something separate. As far as I'm concerned, it's part and parcel of looking at the ethics of AI. If we don't do that, we'll never address the diversity, and then I think we'll fail.
It's the same thing is happening in the pre-intelligent artificial intelligence world, in literature, in the production of knowledge.
Absolutely. But my argument is that, I mean, we all got it. The mobile phones don't fit in female hands. We don't have big enough pockets, and all the design of cars for babies and all these things where, they haven't been designed with society in mind. But AI is going to affect us more profoundly. It's going to make decisions. AI systems are going to make decisions about what we can and can't do.
So how can, from academia, in the teaching part, in the research, and in the research too, how can we address this lack of diversity? I guess from the beginning, from the training of new computer scientists or other professions.
We have to embed the principles very much. It's really difficult, and I've struggled all my career in computing, which goes back to the 1980s, to encourage more women into computing, and I feel like I've singularly failed, because even in my own university, where I was head of department and dean for many years, I haven't shifted the needle in terms of how the percentage of women on our courses. It's still around 15, 17%. It's not shifted. And if we can't get the numbers up in the universities, then we haven't got the people to go into industry. Companies come and say, please, we want to employ women. We haven't got any to send them because we haven't got any coming into our class. So, it's where do you start? And people say, we have to go back to primary school. But I don't think that's the right place to start, because I think the diversities, women get put off going into science and engineering, and particularly computing, when the hormones kick in, about when the teenage become 12, 13, 14, and they suddenly discover, what they are and what they want to be, and there's the peer pressure to not seem unfeminine. It's that sort of. And it's the parents that make the big difference, the mother in particular. It's a big issue. So we're not going to, we haven't found a way to solve it in the last 50 years. So I'm not happy that I'm not convinced we'll find a magic solution in the next 5 years. So we've got to, I think, and I know companies have done this in the past. IBM in particular used to employ philosophers a lot. I say that because you said you were a philosopher, and language people. When in the 80s, they used to come to us and say, we don't want your computer scientists, we want your language students, and then we'll teach them. And I think that's the way we've got to actually create what I call conversion courses, but courses where people who don't have a STEM background can learn about AI and go into the AI workplace. You don't have to be a programmer to be in that work environment. We need diversity in programming, but I think we've got to attack it holistically. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. It does make sense. You have to deal with the complexity, the actual computer science have to.
So I would like it to be mandated, but I don't know, we don't like to mandate about education, but that anyone who does a degree, whatever the degree, should have a course on artificial intelligence and ethics.
Yeah. Yes, because it's the reality we are surrounded by right now.
So that they're A, aware, and B, can think about then doing some sort of postgraduate follow-up, with continuing professional development work in AI to get them into the position of being able to work in that field.
I think it's a good line of work, and a very necessary one.
Well, it's very interesting, actually.
Yes,
there are going to be careers in the application and use of artificial intelligence that we can't even contemplate today, because we don't know what they'll be.
Sometimes I see it like the revenge of humanities.
Maybe. All right, I'll give you that.
Because we're going to merge again
absolutely.
to an analytic kind of knowledge. And I think it's what I need.
I think that's a good way to put it,
We already talk about interdisciplinarity, not mentioning the word, but so what can a university do in order to foster collaboration between researchers from different fields?
Well, you have to. I see it happening here at the University of Catalonia. Yeah, I was talking to people last night. You clearly are doing that. It's in a more traditional university, it's harder to do it, and in somehow our systems as well. You know, we manage maths and physics and chemistry very differently. The researchers publish in the journals in those separate areas, and they get measured on where they get their papers. It's very difficult the way universities are set up traditionally with faculties and departments to do interdisciplinary teaching, because I find it all the time at Southampton, and you know it's really hard to break, and that's because that's my university. I'm not saying Southampton's any different to any other university. It's really hard to say, right, we're going to have a degree taught by computer scientists and social scientists. Well, where does that degree sit? Which department, which faculty? Who owns it? Who takes the money in? And then there's always a problem about how do I pay the people in the other faculty? I mean, it's like this logistic stuff gets in the way. I think in a university like here, you can do that more easily because you're not so, because of the way you approach your students, you're not so structured so heavily structured in your faculty systems as we are. So you have to really work at it. We at Southampton, we have our interdisciplinary institutes, and I run the web science one. But it's hard to, we don't get a lot of funding, and because of course not, the funding goes, the students go where the students are, and the students go to the departments and the faculties. So, but it's every university has its strategy for doing it, and some are more successful than others. But you have to have, and it doesn't just happen naturally. The way the system's set up, you have to have an interdisciplinary strategy. I heard people talking about it, so you're doing pretty well, I think, here.
Yes, but we have the problem that the assessment of the research from the agency, from the state, are
we have that
in another way.
We probably invented it, the research excellence framework, we call it now, and it's a curse. It's done us well historically because it got more funding into universities, but now we're stuck with a system that supports the disciplines.
And we have to deal with very interdisciplinary problem in the reality, not just...
Yes, absolutely. In fact, it's easier for companies. Companies are much more agile about looking at what's the challenge, what team do we need to build to solve that problem. You can't do that in universities. It doesn't work that way.
Do you think open access knowledge can help in this sense?
Yes, but it also creates its own. So I've been involved in open access publishing since. We were one of the first. One of the first universities to mandate that an institutional repository. We built ePrints at Southampton, which is one of the systems used for institutional repositories. And I've been involved in chairing public. I was chair of the publications boards of the Royal Society, and until recently, I'm back on the ACM board as chair of publications for the ACM to try and promote interdisciplinary journals and conferences, because if you haven't got those, I'm often asked about, I'm often called a pioneer, and people ask me about that. And actually, when I started doing multimedia and hypermedia as a young lecturer, I realise now how risky that was, because there were no journals, no conferences. I had people say to me in public, this is not computer science, you must not do it. Right? If you want a future in this department, you mustn't do this work. So it's like exploring something that, just like pioneers do. Like, why do you climb Mount Everest, you have to create those journals and conferences, and you have to be prepared to appreciate. I sometimes think, how did I ever get to where I am? Because I was working in a field that had nowhere to publish, because it didn't exist. I was creating it. Yeah. But of course, looking back, I'm really excited that I did it.
Yeah,
but many people try and fail, because it's just too hard.
Yes.
And that's not got much easier. It's beginning to, but academia is so slow to recognise. We have to think about what are the challenges and what teams we need to put together to tackle them.
Yes, not just in the short term, but in the long term.
Yeah, and it's because it's a matrix. You've got to cut the matrix one way or another. You have to manage people. You have to give people PhDs. You have to, you've got to have systems.
Yeah.
You can't just, well, I suppose you could say this is a PhD of this university and it doesn't matter what subject it's in. I don't know. Yeah. But the processes would have to break down. It's really a battle.
Yeah, but we are in the process. But there are several academics, scholars, they are believing strongly in this kind of, because it's more fun, I guess.
And many of the university leaders do as well. You know, the whatever you call them, vice chancellors, presidents, whatever, rectors, they're called. They believe in it. But then in between them and what actually happens, you have this system, which is really difficult to break down.
Well, we name it scholar grammar. All the infrastructure in the organization doesn't allow the change. But
so we're chipping away.
Yes, I think. So I'll go with my final question. And how do you envision the future of the internet? It's a huge question, I know, but...
Well... I always answer questions by looking back. The internet is effectively, the invention was the protocols that Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn defined in 50 years ago next year. So 1974, they defined TCP and IP, which are the basic internet protocols, universal and open, that enable a way that any computer could talk to any other computer. That was the internet had existed in people's imagination before, and in America it came out of the Department of Defense to have a decentralized system. We know that story, but the basic invention was the protocols, and they're 50 years old next year. And when we were hit by COVID, we all piled onto the internet. Right, we had to do everything on the internet. Luckily, it was there for us, and TikTok emerged, and we all could talk on Zoom, and that's the way we stayed in communication. And the amazing thing is, it didn't fail us; it stayed up and running, right? Yeah. Which is an amazing testament to the original pioneers of the internet and what they did. But it's still a very fragile. I mean, I've written about this in the book that was released last year, 4 Internets. It's a very fragile system because we don't own it. Nobody owns it. The governments don't own it. Big companies don't own it. They use it. And it's evolving differently in different parts of the world, although the basic technical infrastructure is the same. So my big point for the future is we have to keep that technical infrastructure as open and as universal as we can if we want a global internet that doesn't fragment, so that we can, in 50 years' time, send an email or whatever it will be, a mind meld or whatever it will be in 50 years' time via an internet that's open and global, even if it's governed differently in different parts of the world. So that's really important to me for the future, is that we can maintain this system and get governments to recognise that it is part of our basic infrastructure and it needs to be protected. But it's not like, you can't say, oh, the UN will do it, or Washington will do it, or it's of us, it's ours. Yeah. So it's very like, to me, it's very like climate science. It's like we have to protect the digital planet as much as we need to protect the physical planet.
Because it's a human right. Thank you very much. It was very inspiring.